into our November luncheon. I want to start off by saying congratulations to Joy Walker. She is our volunteer spotlight of the month. And she is also celebrating her 10-year anniversary this month as well. I've got a couple of things to discuss with you guys, but first off, I want to start off by saying happy birthday to Miss Jean Villarreal on November 8th, Miss Bobby Gwynn on the 12th, Miss Diana Smead on the 28th, and Laura Hernandez on the 30th. Happy birthday, everyone. We also have lots and lots of anniversaries this year. Our 1-year anniversaries are going to be Pat Mejia, Madison McGarren, and Nick Solis. 2 years is Sarah Sawyer, Candace Garza, that I spelled incorrectly on this page, and Pierce Breach. 3 years will be Darren Young, Sherry Judas, Robert Padilla, and Rhonda Potades. 4 years, Rebecca Bootson, Sasha Burns, and Allie Atkinson. And again, Miss Joy Walker at 10 full years. All right. I also wanted to let you guys know we have lots of booth opportunities and parties and all kinds of good things coming soon. So the newsletter that goes out on Friday at noon, double check that. There will be invitations, sign-up sheets, all the good things. We have our kids' Christmas party on December 9th. So if you have local children that want to come, there is a flyer on the newsletter, and then your supervisor has a copy as well. And I will need RSVPs for that by November 28th. So all children, family members, anybody in the household that comes, as well as any volunteers that want to attend for food purposes. And then also just a friendly reminder, continuing education hours are due. 12 hours are due by December 31st. And that is all I've got. Christine will be giving you our case spotlight.
Hi, everyone. I work in Victoria County, and I have 5 cases available at this time, but I'm going to tell you about 3 or 4 of them right now. The first one is a 17-year-old girl. She is placed in a foster home in Houston. This is a relatively new placement for her. She had been in RTCs and never quite fit in. And she's worked really hard on her coping skills that they've lowered her level of care. And she's now in a foster home and she's doing really well there. She needs a casa. The attorney ad litem is SB Baron and the caseworker is Prashant. LR is a 12-year-old girl. She's in a foster home in Lyman, Texas, which is southwest of San Antonio. She is a special needs child. She's verbal, but not very verbal. She can communicate a little bit. She's not very verbal, but she does need 24/7 care. She is in a foster home. They do want her to stay there as long as they're able to meet her needs, but she is on tear, and we're hoping at some point to maybe get her a permanent home. I have also 2 little boys. They are 2 quite energetic little boys. They are in Eagle Pass, and this is a case that was a CPS case about 7 or 8 months ago. There was a reunification, and then they were brought back into care. So it's a new case, but it has his recent history on it. These 2 boys, like I said, are in a foster home, and the attorney ad litem is SB Baron, and Katie Johnson is the caseworker. The case that I said before, the 12-year-old with the special needs, that attorney ad litem is also SB Baron, and the caseworker is Melanie Harvey. So if you're interested in any one of these cases, or two other ones that I have, just give me a call, 361-649-2525. Thank you.
So today, we're really excited that we are having our first potluck luncheon for Thanksgiving. It's the beginning of the Thanksgiving season. And so we just wanted to take a moment to tell you thank you. Thank you for the amazing work that you do with the children and the families that you work with. They're going to remember the person who remembered their birthday and things like that. You guys are making a lasting impact on them. And we couldn't do what we do here without all of y'all there. So we just want to say thank you and give a moment for everyone else to say thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much to all of you for all you do for CASA, for your CASA kids. We really do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to my volunteers. I think I have 4 here, and the rest are, I'm sure, going to be watching this. Thank you so much for everything you do. I say, I know they feel like they have the best volunteers, but I think I have the best volunteers. And so I just want to thank them for everything you do. A lot of you just go above and beyond, just, you know, and I know that the kids really, you know, benefit from it and they appreciate it. So thank you all.
I just want to say thank you to all of my volunteers. You guys are amazing people, big-hearted, and you just don't know the amazing things that you do for these children. Thank you so much.
I want to say thank you for all the time and effort you put into the CASA kids and the CASA program. We appreciate everything you do. And I know a lot of the kids do too.
Thanks so much.
That's a hard one. Thank you all for being here today. Let's do a little show of hands. How many are CASA volunteers today here? Great. Mark, so you'll see who your audience is. And how about board members? Board, 1, 2, guests? Yeah, because we've got some in-training volunteers and an interested board member. And let's see, how about staff? You just hold them off. Yeah, yay. Good turnout. We're going to be ones listening to you today. Thank you. And thank you all, really. That was great. You all have done so much work this year, and we should say thank you every day. You all deserve that. These kids are really the recipients of such great work, and their families too. We're really leading the way in the state on making sure that children are getting reunified with their parents or their relatives. We're leading the way. We're being looked to. This CASA program, your work at the state level, is very impressed with what you're doing on a daily basis. So thank you for that. Just a couple quick things, and then we'll get on to our speaker. Nick has got a bit of a third thing, but he wanted me to let you know that wine pairing is ongoing. It's happening. We're in crunch time. A million things are happening at once. So if he may tap you to say, hey, can you do this? Say, yeah, you'll be glad to. Also, we have got some new training travel requirements. Volunteers are all going to be receiving a DocuSign from Kelsey. You're going to sign this at the case start now, and it's going to allow you to get reimbursement for travel that you may do, or the travel that we apply for that we show on our grants. You only have to sign it once, and that'll be taken care of. Staff is unfortunately going to have to sign a sheet asking for travel permission every time we travel. So you volunteers, thank you. You all get the easy one, and I'm glad of it. So if you don't get that document, let me know. And also, if you do a travel that's over 60 miles or 60 miles or more, talk to your supervisor. Let's get you reimbursed for that. There are state dollars sitting there to reimburse you at the IRS rate for travel. We would love to get that to you. So please let us know if you have any questions there. Celeste Hunter, our board member, who is currently our board secretary, wanted to be here today. They're building a house. She has contractors all over the place, and I think she has Thanksgiving dinner down the line. So she's trying to get it all done. She can't get here, but she works for the Victoria Electric Co-op, and she's there looking for adoptive family. So if you have a family that lives or takes service from the Victoria Electric Co-op, please go to that Facebook page by December 1st and nominate your family. Last year, we had a family come out. Yes.
They do have to be a customer. I think.
Yeah, that's right. They have to be a customer of the Victoria Electric Co-op. So, but it's a great thing. We had one family get nominated and were successful in getting those services. So if you would like, let everyone know that they should apply. They can do it on their Facebook page at the VEC Facebook page, or they can call 361-573-2428. And that's 361-573-2428 to sign up for that. And if you could do it by December 1st, that'd be great, because they're going to be vetting folks as soon as they come in. So anybody who would like to have a whole Christmas done for them, that would be great. You all have been very busy in October. I just wanted to run through the numbers quickly. We had 161 children in care. 31 of those children hadn't to volunteer, so we had an 81% volunteer to case child ratio. And we had, of those children, they made up 104 families. And 24 of the families had to volunteer for a 77% volunteer to case ratio. We had one child leave care. They were in care for a year. Pamela Edwards had worked the case for the last 5 months, and the child was reunified with the father. So that was great work. We had 6 children come into care. I think they all might have gone to Christine hearing her load. So it was 6 children coming into care and 5 that made up 5 families. We have 57 volunteers that are active today and active in October. And volunteers provided 236 hours of service. And they drove 567 miles visiting the children that they're looking out for. So the year-to-date total is 2,777 hours and miles of 18,861. And if we were putting a dollar value on that, year-to-date would be a donation from our volunteers of $72,882. So great work, you all. Thank you very much. I'm going to also point out, do take a look at the upcoming Friday CASA newsletter that will be emailed to you. There is our legislative priority training session. I think you'll find it very interesting. Even if you don't want to join the LAC team, take a look at this. It's an hour video and it's going to be well worth it. You're going to find out what we're looking to in the upcoming legislative session that we consider starts on January 1st. And who is next? Amanda Collins, our vice president, soon to be president of the board. Oh, let's make Amanda.
What if it's me?
Well, then.
Sasha.
All right.
Look at you. Beverly.
All right. All yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we had our board meeting a couple weeks back, and a couple things that we did at the board meeting. We got our budget approved for the coming year. I am actually the chair of our nominating committee, so we're working to slate our executive committee. Pamela Hudney, she's been on the board for 9 years, you said?
6 years.
6 years.
Yes, she's gonna report months 3 years.
She's retiring from being treasurer, so we're working to replace that essential role. If y'all know of anybody that's interested in joining the board, or we've actually talked about getting together an advisory board again, let me know. Because you have my contact information, you can get it from Tim. So advisory board, board members, anybody that might be interested in serving in that capacity. Let's see, Rhonda Potates came to our last meeting and talked to us about the children that she serves, and we really appreciated that. And so if anybody else has any interest in coming and visiting with the board, we'd love to hear from y'all. So again, get with Tim or your supervisor, and you can make that happen. What else? Let's see. Over the next several months, we're going to be reviewing our bylaws just to make sure that we have those streamlined and up to date. I think the last time they were approved was 2018, so we're working on that. And the wine pairing, we still have some tickets for that, and it should be really great. So there's a QR code on this sheet. So if you haven't bought tickets yet, we're working on getting all the seating arrangements. So we'd love to have y'all. All right, and we've got Mark Kelly with Billy Catan Outreach Program, and we're glad to have him here.
Let's see if I can spin all these plates. Okay, my name is Mark Kelly. I am a counselor at Billy Catan Recovery Outreach here locally in Victoria. We're an outpatient drug and alcohol addiction treatment center. We're also building a residential facility within the next few years, and that's something that I'm really excited to be a part of. It's really a privilege to come and talk to you guys today. I love what CASA does. I think you guys are really, really special and unique in the work that y'all do. I'm always impressed with the tenacity that y'all have working with children. I don't know what it's like to be a CASA worker, but I know that it can probably be an uphill battle sometimes, getting a good outcome. And I want to talk about today something that we at Billy Catan, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of firsthand experience with it, which is addiction and the understanding of addiction. Because I think that the better we understand something, the better we can respond to it in when we encounter it. I think that addiction is a really tough thing to respond to. It's very frustrating. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you're dealing with someone who's addicted. When you're dealing with parents who choose drugs over their children, it raises a valid question. It's like, why the hell would somebody do that? And so this is a kind of understanding that I think we can have a conversation about. So for this talk, I want to accomplish three things. I want to briefly define addiction, which is not an easy thing to do. I want to look at what a root cause of addiction could be in a person, and talk about kind of a family cycle of what that looks like, particularly in children. And I also want to take a kind of big picture approach to looking at what solutions are, what recovery might look like in a community. And I want to do this to underscore the complexity of the problem that addiction is it's a tough thing to wrap your head around. So I call this the cycle of addiction because I think if you look at this circle, we all kind of intuitively know that these things are connected to each other. Addiction doesn't just happen like in a vacuum out of nowhere. We know that there are genetic components that some people are susceptible to it, but I think more important than that are childhood experiences and the development of children that put people at a big risk to develop addiction. But when it comes to like, how are these things related? Like we know that they are related, but how are they related? That's a complicated thing. And so I was putting this talk together. I had to piece like a bunch of different things together to try and get something that I could wrap my head around. We think about addiction as drug and alcohol use, but that's really only half of the equation in my mind. Drug and alcohol use have to do with this part, but how does that tie into childhood and family? Let's see if I can do this. I wanted to also include a lot of statements and literature from recovering addicts who write literature and have recovery meetings, because I think that's really the best way to understand addiction is to read what addicts are saying about how they recover. This is a quote from Narcotics Anonymous, which is a book that's written by recovering addicts. And I think it's one of the most profound statements in the book because it really underscores the lifelong nature of addiction. And it implies that whatever this disease of addiction is, it exists in an addict before there is drug and alcohol use. And so what that says is that addiction is not necessarily about drugs and alcohol. That is perhaps symptoms of a deeper issue. And if you sit in an NA meeting and you hear people talking about their own recovery, you always hear them say things like, you know, we didn't have a drug problem, we had a living problem. And as a clinician, I'm very interested in what this living problem is because I want to help people overcome that. We watch our clients, and I know y'all see it every day. You see people choose the drug life over anything else in their life. And what's the root of that? Why would somebody be compelled to do that? Defining addiction. I wanted to go over some of the kind of standard definitions of what addiction is. Probably like the last 150 years, there's been a push to describe addiction as a medical disease. And the reason why is because it really kind of emphasizes the complexity of it, that it's not just like you're a bad person and that's why you're an addict, or you're just a weak person and that's why you're an addict. And this has been going on for a long time to define it in the terms of like a brain disorder. And this is from 1884, and the definition up there is like almost exactly the same definition that we use today. If you open up our diagnostic manual, like it's almost the same thing. So it hasn't really moved that much. Addiction is a disease that has symptoms, and some of the symptoms are observable and some of them are not. The observable symptoms of addiction would be like physiological stuff, like someone's sick, or they're losing weight, or they're in detox, or they're intoxicated. Like those are physiological symptoms. And then there are behavioral symptoms, which are more like, you know, criminal activity, stealing, neglecting children, abuse, domestic violence, all of that stuff that society tries to solve with incarceration. And then there's also these unobservable symptoms like cognitive symptoms, addictive thinking, denial, minimizing the problem, making excuses, you know, whatever an addict tells himself to continue the cycle. And that's where counseling really comes in to try and help people. And we know all of that stuff is like it's out there and it's pretty much common sense. But for me, I want to focus on this like not really well-defined, like what I would call almost like a spiritual kind of holistic existential void that people have that's really hard to put your finger on, because I think that's really where addiction is at, more so than just like someone's high on meth. Like I think there's something there that we can talk about. Defining it though is not an easy thing. And so this is, next is the diagnostic manual. So if somebody walks into my office, I use this here. This is like how you diagnose mental health. It has every mental health disorder you can think of, and then some, like probably every single person would fall under one of these things. The word addiction is not in the manual at all. They don't want to use the word addiction because that's not really like a technical term. It's more of an idea. And so they use what are called substance use disorders. And so someone comes in my office and they're drinking every day. Well, they probably have an alcohol use disorder. Or someone may have meth use disorder or opiate use disorder or whatever it may be. And those things are very useful for the medical treatment of substance use. You know, you want to know how to treat someone, especially in a medical sense. But it's not very useful when you think about what addiction actually is. There are people in the recovery community in AA who have been sober 30 years. They still go to meetings. They go to meetings all the time. They don't qualify for substance use disorder. They wouldn't meet that criteria. So there's something about them that compels them to continue going to AA meetings. And why is that? You know, there's something that has somehow lingered in them that they will continually need to address. And that's really, really interesting to me because it's not really like, it's kind of hard to figure out what that is. There's something disordered about alcoholic or addict mind that really benefits from what 12-step meetings offer long term. I know guys that are like 55 years sober. They go to AA 3 times a week. And that's awesome. But it's like, what is that? And so I go to quotes from the literature. I collected like some different, there's an anonymous thing for like every single thing you could ever think of. There's like Overeaters Anonymous, there's Gangsters Anonymous, there's Emotions Anonymous. There's like 3 different sexual addiction anonymous, and they all kind of like fight with each other. But these are quotes from here, and I wanted to kind of like put how frustrating it can be for the person who's suffering from addiction, because it's hard to be compassionate towards people when you know that they're like throwing their families away so that they can go, get high or hire a prostitute or something. That's frustrating. But it's also frustrating for the person that's doing it. I think addiction is a disease. Like, I think that, but I don't think it's a disease like cancer is a disease. It's just not. Because in addiction, the person that's addicted is continuously doing the thing that makes him sick. It's like somebody with a shrimp allergy who's like ordering shrimp, and then he almost dies, and the family has to rush him to the hospital, and then he gets better and he gets out, and then he orders shrimp again and hides it from his family so that he can almost die again. Like, that's what it's like. And why do people do such insane things? For what? And so where in that cycle does somebody get so twisted that they will literally choose their addiction over their job, their freedom, their family? And knowing that recovery exists, why do so few people recover? It's like 10%. That's it. And we're talking about like 10% of the population is probably addicted to something. And like out of that, which is like, 30 million people, maybe 10% of those people will recover. And why do people choose the drug life, which is really a slow form of suicide, over a healthy life? And we know that there's choice involved, and people kind of write this off. And I've heard a lot of doctors talking about this. Well, there's no choice. They have no choice. Their brains are diseased and they have no choice. They have to keep using, but that's not true. Because if it was, there would literally be nobody that recovers. It would just be a death sentence, and that'd be the end of it. But we know that people recover. So then the question is, why is it so hard to make that choice? Why is it so overwhelmingly difficult for people to choose recovery, even when their whole life is falling apart? And that's the question that I want to answer. This is Johan Hari. If you get a chance to hear Johan Hari talk, his TED talk about addiction is really, really good. I like his definition of addiction better than anything in a manual, because he defines addiction by what it's not. So he says, addiction is not connection. And so he likes to say, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And I think that's a very elegant way to say it, because it implies that addiction then is some disconnection. And then what is that disconnection? And does that disconnection exist before a person ever picks up a drug? And can we identify that in children or in adolescents? And if we can treat people before they ever pick up a drug or a drink. And so to understand what that disconnection is, I want to talk about a psychological study. And if you've ever had like Psychology 101, you know that For some reason, every psychological study involves rats. Like all of them. We love to mess with rats. Psychologists do. I'm not a psychologist. Rats are famous for getting addicted to drugs. If you put a rat in a box and then he lives there and you put, there's like 2 buttons on there and one of them is like cocaine and the other one is like food. Eventually the rat will starve because they'll press the cocaine button compulsively. And so they're like, well, cocaine causes addiction because there's cocaine and there's food and then the rat is addicted to cocaine. The thinking though, whenever some researchers in the 70s were looking at this, it's like, well, that rat is living his life in a metal box. Like that's probably miserable. And so what they did was they built what they called a rat park in their lab or whatever. They had a big enclosure with like all these little things for rats to do. And they had places for them to sleep and they had other rats in there for them to hang out with. And when they put the rats in the rat park and offered them drugs, the rate of drug use was like way down. And also, if they took an addicted rat from his metal cage and put him into the rat park, his drug use went way down. Because rats are social animals. And if you isolate a social being, they're going to be miserable. And so the thinking is like, even though they're rats, and I know they're not human beings, but is it possible that the rats that get addicted to cocaine in this environment are medicating the pain that is involved in their own isolation? Which is a pretty deep thing to think about a mouse. But I think there's probably something to it. Because it identifies social isolation and rejection as the driver of addiction. And I think that's really, really important. So prior to like the cocaine in the rat's brain, you know, changing the rat's chemistry or whatever, there is that readiness to medicate the unnatural condition of isolation that the rat is in. And social isolation is painful. Your brain does not differentiate between social isolation and actual pain. It's the same kind of pain. And in human studies, I guess they do studies where they like put a person in a group and then kick them out of the group or something out of that. And they like measure what happens. They have found that rejection causes pain. And if you give a person who's been rejected a painkiller, guess what? They feel better. And that's not an addiction study. That's just like a pain study. Because we as human beings, it is in our DNA to depend on each other. And so rejection to your brain is a very threatening thing. It's a survival threat. Being an outcast, being isolated, your brain treats that as a threat to your survival. And so if you think about what kids go through, you know, it starts to kind of like click. But how does pain of isolation, which can be resolved, how can that result in like this chronic sense of isolation that someone might develop that will stick with them for the rest of their life? Because that's what I think addicts have. I have no idea what time it is. 12:15. Do we need to leave at 1?
No. Okay. Those you need to do.
Yeah, you guys need to set for it.
There is, and I try not to make it too like crazy, but we all have we all learn how to regulate our own emotions. Okay, babies learn how to regulate their emotions, and so if you have a baby and the baby is in pain or uncomfortable or hungry or whatever, the baby cries. Well, guess what? Parent comes. And so from infancy, we learn that when we are uncomfortable, we will reach out to another person and they will come and comfort us. That is how people will learn how to regulate their own internal state. They will reach out and connect with someone, and then they will be comforted. In the course of development in young children or adolescents, there might be some kind of rejection that happens to where the child feels uncomfortable, in pain, traumatized, and they will reach out to someone and they will be rejected. They will be told, no, you're stupid, that didn't happen, you're crazy, you don't ever need to talk about that, whatever it might be. Or they may be rejected at school. And some of it's very profound, like abuse and neglect, and some of it's more subtle. But when you're young and you reach out to someone to give you comfort and they reject you, particularly if it's an important person in your life, then the act of reaching out to someone becomes threatening. It becomes scary. So if I'm a little kid and my mom hits me whenever I told her that, my dad did something, then it is now scary for me to reach out to my mom. And so I have lost the ability to regulate my own emotions. So I might develop behaviors, self-soothing behaviors, compulsive behaviors. In adolescence, it's like cutting, it's acting out. And then, of course, you reach the holy grail of regulating your emotions, which are drugs and alcohol, because drugs and alcohol are really, really good at it. Like whatever pain you're feeling, if you drink or take a drug, you don't feel that pain. And there's all kinds of other things that people do, but I think addiction is at its root a person who's trying to take something from outside and change their internal state. And so that can be eating disorders, sex addiction, perfectionism, whatever it might be. It's just, you can just pick something. And so this is going to kind of like lead me to how that rejection can become a like self rejection. We talk about adverse developmental experiences in addiction a lot. These are things that happen in childhood that wound a child in a way. It wounds the emotional regulation system, and the child loses the ability to control their internal state. And it's really important to talk about children because children in particular see their parents as an extension of themselves. Young children don't really understand that my parent is a separate person and I'm a separate person. They identify with their parent as themselves, which is why kids think that everything is their fault if something goes wrong. They don't know that there's other people that are doing things. So when a child is rejected by their parent, it is like a self-rejection. The child is like, well, I'm bad because this is what, because mom is this way or dad is this way. And then as adolescents, our identities come from our peers. We learn who we are by interacting with our friends. That's why kids jump from like cliques and phases and all that stuff. Kids are learning who they are. If they're bullied, if they're rejected, if they're outcast, it really becomes like an internalized rejection. They're not like, well, that's their problem that they're rejecting me. It's more like, no, I have the problem and that's why I'm being rejected. And Aaron Beck, who is the like inventor of cognitive therapy, he wrote with cocaine addicts like in the 80s. And the number one thought that a cocaine addict has is, I'm not worthy of love. That's the belief that cocaine addicts carry around. And you can see how someone who's addicted to cocaine, who has a low self-esteem and believes they're not fundamentally not worthy of love, probably had that belief since they were kids. So what the general idea of what I want to say is that there's real neurological changes that happen from a wound at a young age, from being neglected, abused, abandoned. That has real effects. And it leaves a person essentially crippled in that they are unable to handle their own emotions. And once they discover substances, which all teenagers do, if they have that wound and they're carrying it with them, they will latch on to that. And the substance will become remarkably effective. to the point where it becomes the most important relationship in their life. I think addiction is a choice. I do not think that it is not a choice. I think an addict chooses to use drugs every time that they use. And this is not because they're a bad person, but because in the moment, getting high, whatever other consequence that they have going, getting high, not getting high is a worse consequence. And this is how someone can be driven to choose addiction over just not like anything else in their life, including their own family. And we can kind of write this off as insanity or like, well, addicts are just selfish, but I don't think that's true. I don't think addicts are insane at all. I think they're making a rational choice. There's a logic to what addicts do. It truly feels like you can threaten an addict with like, you're going to lose your kids forever if you are positive on the drug. You're going to go to jail for 6 months if you're positive. And they're like, yeah, that's scary, but like not getting high is scary. Because the relationship that an addict has with their drug is the most important relationship that they have, because all other relationships are threatened. All other relationships with other people are scary, and they have this one thing that's comforting to them. And you're going to be like, oh, you have to stop doing that. Well, like hell I do. I mean, if you were given the choice to amputate your arm or spend a month in jail, like what would you do? You'd spend a month in jail. Like if those were the choices, pretty bad choices, but if that's what you were looking at. For a person that's using drugs, and taking away the drug is basically like an amputation or a suicide or a loss of something that's like for them. And for a person who's addicted, their relationship with the drug is what allows them to have a relationship with other people. It's what allows them to have a relationship with their kids, with their family, in their mind. And I would say addiction is a completed disease when the brain treats the drug as a survival tool. It has become a survival tool for the person that's using. And I think we should appreciate that when we get frustrated. Okay, risk factors. I'm going to burn through this here. These are risk factors I would look at in children. These things kind of fall through the cracks. I don't think it's really like, these are not really diagnostic stuff that you find in the manual, but I really think that like kids that are bullied, kids that feel isolated from other people, kids that have been rejected by their parents, which is like the kids that y'all work with, it's kind of a good starting place to look at, you know, is a child unable to make friends? Is a child feeling alone? Those are kind of like, to me, the biggest risk factors for addiction later in life. Cutting is like 100% that kid is going to use drugs. Some kind of acting out like that to try and soothe themselves. And I think that's why trauma-informed treatment of addiction is so important. I think it's probably the most exciting thing that has happened to treatment of addiction in a long time. And then it comes back to the original thing. So kind of the summary of that is that in childhood, a wound occurs when the child feels rejected and isolated from others and becomes fearful of opening up to another person to help them comfort themselves. And then in the course of normal experimentation with drugs, they learn that a drug solves that problem, and that creates kind of the foundation for addiction later in life. And then those people go on to have partners, and they communicate poorly, and so they raise children that communicate poorly, and it just continues like the whole thing over and over again. And we as a society don't know what to do about it, because we have been fighting this thing for like, you know, 50 years, and what good has it done? I think the solution is going to involve a community effort. Like, people do recover from addiction, but it's not an individual process. It's not really helpful to just put someone alone and be like, figure it out, or threaten them with consequences, which you have to do. Understandably, you have to have consequences for behavior, but also know that the threat of consequence is not particularly effective in curbing addiction. The more we understand it, the better chance people have, because every encounter, if someone gets in trouble, or if someone goes to the doctor, or if someone has CPS, every encounter that person has with a professional or a volunteer or a caseworker can be part of restoring that connection that they need. If we come at people with an understanding and compassionate kind of attitude, it can go a long way in helping someone recover, helping someone feel comfortable, even if you hate what they're doing. Help them feel comfortable, help them feel not judged for what they do, even if it doesn't make any sense. It starts with family members who can also get a better understanding of what we're dealing with. A lot of this addiction stuff is swept under the rug. We just rather not talk about it. And as professionals, we can work together. Like, I'm really glad to be here because I want to work with you guys. We have, I think what's really exciting is kind of like a community effort for treatment. I want to build like a whole web of recovery. I want there to be resources in Victoria. There's not really. There's no rehab to send anyone to. The jail is like the rehab, which is not appropriate. We want to help people get abstinent and stop using, and we want to help them get stable, and we want to help them connect to other people. And so, I'm hoping that in the next few years, we'll have a residential treatment center, and I really want that to bring in sober living houses, which is a tremendous resource to kind of bolster the 12-step community. Because really, like, AA meetings, good old-fashioned, humble AA meetings are like probably the best way to go, because it's free. People make friends, they're social. Like, try getting someone to actually go. It's impossible, but if it was bigger, if it was more active, and I'm hoping that it will be in the next few years, because that's ultimately what's going to heal the disconnection of addiction, is helping people feel connected to each other in a community. So anyway, that's my talk. I'm really grateful for the invite. It's really awesome to be here. Thank you so much.
So my question to you is, do you feel that when someone feels alcohol or drug, it actually changes feeling?
Yes.
Okay, so do you feel that can be passed on to the next person?
Yes, I do. But I also think that it is a combination of the genetic and also how a person's raised. Like, how does that person interact with their children? If they have the genetic, trait for alcoholism and they're heavy drinkers, probably not going to relate very well with their kids. And so I think that it's that combination of things that really creates a like super high chance of problems later on. This all starts at childhood, all of it. Anyone else?
With many times there, talk about this dimension. Does your program have any type of work with the spiritual aspect?
Yes.
Having connection with God? Okay.
Yeah, we are a faith-based, nonprofit. And so we are able to address those issues and use state money to do it. So That's a really cool position to be in. Our services are free for like most people who walk in the door. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything to get counseling. It doesn't cost anything to do the groups, to do the whole program. And we definitely address spiritual issues. I think that's a really big component of addiction treatment. Thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am. I would say in 2025, not 25 years. Anyone else?
Hey, John, I don't know, but I think we're working with children that have experienced some trauma that may predispose them to addiction. How can we, as our help, as a class of volunteer, in our environment, is there any?
You know, I think y'all already do it. Building a relationship with a child that is safe is really like what therapy is. Like there's a lot of technical stuff with therapy, but the thing that works about therapy is it's a safe relationship with another person. So you guys, in the course of what you do, which is why it's so important what y'all do, you build safe relationships with children. That goes a long way to helping mitigate some of that isolation and some of that rejection. So I mean, I think y'all already do it.
I do see that the relationship with children and the family, some of the things that stand out. You know, really is further into the future.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does.
You said that, you know, you have seriously rehab sober living plan and it's good. Because they work with neighbors.
Yeah.
But who do we get to move this process or bring out to report? I'm sorry.
I would say, I mean, you know, Oxford House in San Antonio, they're the biggest sober living houses. They tried to come down here, but if you don't have like a rehab in the city where Oxford House is, you don't really have a stream of people coming in. And so they could never keep it open. You really need like kind of a center, a focal point. And typically that would be like a residential facility. You're going to bring in people who from all over. And then that will make it viable to have things like sober living. I mean, I have homeless men. It's like, what are you supposed to do? You know? And when you don't have those kind of resources, it falls on the jail, which is not a great solution for a lot of the problems that are happening. But it's kind of like what's there now. And so you can't just have people running around being, you know, insane. So you have to do something with them. Thank you, though. You can call Billy T. Catan. Yes, ma'am.
Are y'all in any way evaluating Promise Point? I was thinking that was some sort of sober living.
Promise Point. Don't get me lying about Promise Point. I don't Are those little mini houses? Those are little like micro houses, you know, the homeless. Yeah, they like built a little thing out there. We're not affiliated with it. I can't remember who is. I know there's an organization. I think it's a church that was involved in that, but I'm not sure. But in my understanding, it's not necessarily a program. I think it's like housing, you know, which is good. Anyone else? Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.